welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotello Esquire, and Evan Ginzburg, also special guest host, Mike Lano. Do you want to introduce our guest for this evening?
Sure. And we were just talking about Camp Kenny Casanova, book, publisher, etc., writer extraordinaire, the Godfathers. Well, John was part of that, Godfathers of COVID Con and Collie Con. Mm-hmm. We're going to be talking and promoting our friend John Cosper's great book with Johnny Candido, Chris Candido, No Gimmicks Needed. And of course, Evan has interviewed John and knows John very well. I think Russ does. So the three of us know John. And terrific book. So I'll shut up and let Evan say some stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, John, whenever I think of Chris Candido, I think of a tremendous technician, a great talent. But there's always that, feeling of sadness that he left us so early. Tell us about your feelings about Chris and the book itself.
Chris, this book came about because of Tracy Smothers and working with him on his book. It was one of those easy questions for Tracy. Anytime I ever heard him asked, who's your favorite guy you ever stepped in the ring with, he would say Candido. Most guys couldn't even get the question out before he answered. Tracy just thought the world of him, and we weren't even done with Tracy's book when he was saying, Candido's got to be your next book. It's got to be your next book. I'll get you in touch and everything like that. And he did. He got me in touch with Jimmy Shoulders, and then Jimmy got me in touch with Johnny. It was thrilled to be able to work with Johnny and the family on it. Chris he's one of the most memorable guys to me from the 90s when I would have been when I was in college when he had his WWF run as Skip of the Body Donnas. And I know a lot of people roll their eyes at that particular gimmick, and let's face it, it was beneath him. It was beneath his level of talent. But the Skip Donna and Barry Horowitz angle stuck with me. It's one of the most memorable storylines that I remember from that particular era. And as I got to know more of Chris's body of work over the years and got to see what kind of a performer he was, he could do everything. I mean, it's hard to think where the industry would be, where wrestlers would be, and where he would be. If what happened, in 2005 didn't happen, because he was 33 years old. He would be 49 now. No doubt he would be either running the training center in Orlando, and if he wasn't there, he'd be behind the scenes at Impact or AEW. He would have mentored, and it was just kind of getting to that stage of his career where he was kind of becoming the mentor and, the guy taking other guys under his wing. And it's just, yeah, it is sad to think, my goodness, what kind of impact could he have had ultimately? Because, he was an 18-year veteran when he passed, but he was still only 33 years old.
Yeah, well, Candido is still talked about by a lot of people. What do you think made him have such a big impact, considering he wasn't, a major champion in any of the main feds? The big
he was NWA champion. He was the first NWA champion, world champion when they redid.
He was, yeah, he was. But it was his heart, it was his passion. As soon as he discovered pro wrestling and he met his step grandfather, Popeye Chuck Richards, he was in love. He was in love with the sport of pro wrestling. There was nothing else he wanted to do. There was nothing else he was. He was a very, his mom told me he was a great student. He was straight A's. He could have done anything he wanted in college. When it came to athletics, Johnny could play anything. Johnny could play basketball, baseball, football. Chris couldn't throw a football or shoot a basketball or even throw a baseball to save his life. But he loved wrestling. He was good at wrestling. He had a passion and a love for it, and he just had a heart for people too. Anybody I talked with, from any of the guys from ECW, or even the independent guys that he was working with in his final years, he was just kind to everyone. He didn't look down on anyone. There were the veterans who, I did extra work one time on WWE, so you got to kiss my boots because I'm a real veteran. Chris never treated anybody like that. He was the kindest guy in the room, the first guy to shake the new guy's hand in the room, to make him feel welcome, to build him up after his match. He was just a very positive influence on every locker room he was in. There's a story in the book too about him standing up in the locker room. Hey, we're supposed to be having fun. We get to do what we love. This is something we loved watching as kids, and that passion just spilled over into everything that he did.
I was sitting at a New Jersey Indie ages ago, and who's sitting next to me? Chris Candido, Tammy, and Sabu, and they were just kids at the time, kids. And it's amazing how far all of them got. But it was also a very rough ride for all of them. What's your take on that?
Well, it certainly was. I mean, they they had, Chris had his demons, and Tammy had hers, and she's still certainly dealing with hers. But I mean, that was kind of the era that they were in. Was there was a lot of drugs. There was the performance enhancing drugs. There were the pain relieving drugs and everything like that. And unfortunately, he fell victim to it. And I don't know that did it. I don't know what trajectory he would have taken if he hadn't had those issues, But I mean, the bottom line of it was he was clean and sober, and he had put his life back together and was back in good health, when unfortunately just a bad decision of getting on a plane shortly after having surgery is what cost him his life.
I'll tell you, I was sitting there at that indie, and I've been to thousands of indies over nearly 50 years, and I just said to myself, these guys have something. It was Candido against Sabu, and I'm like, these guys are going to make it, and they felt special even then, and they really were kids, like fresh-faced kids back then. And I always was a fan of Chris's, and also Tracy Smothers and a lot of the guys you've worked with. And tell us about some of your other books also.
Sure. Well, I just Princess Victoria's book just came out about a month and a half ago. That was one that another writer she'd approached another writer, and he was unavailable and referred her over to me. But she's been working on a book about her life for about 9-10 years now with her sister. And it's one of those stories. It wasn't just about telling her wrestling life. It was about telling her early life when she suffered, just some unimaginable sexual abuse as a child. Beginning when she was about 3 or 4. And it's her story about survival and her story about overcoming all that, becoming independent when she was 16, thanks to Sandy Barr and to the wrestlers up in the Pacific Northwest, how Sandy Barr tricked her into training to become a wrestler. And she had a very brief career, only 4 years, but certainly has left an impact. She was a 2018 CAC honoree at the Cauliflower Alley Club. She's a fantastic storyteller, very funny lady. I tell you, I've been really blessed and fortunate to work with some of the best storytellers and the people who have left behind some of the best stories in the business. And that goes for working with Tracy Smothers, who was just an incredible guy and a great storyteller. Madman Pondo is another one. Dr. D. David Schultz. Right now, I'm actually working with Karen McDaniel. We're putting together kind of an oral history of Wahoo McDaniel, and rather than a traditional biography, she's kind of wanting to get everybody to kind of chip in stories and kind of the memories and the legend of who Wahoo was. And to me, Evan, you and I have talked about this a little bit. It's all about the story. I love the great stories, and I love preserving the great stories. And again, I've just been very fortunate to work with some great storytellers and to stumble onto the stories like the Black Panther Jim Mitchell and Elvira Snodgrass and Chris Candido of people that have stories worth telling and stories that people still smile and laugh at when they get to hear.
I think it's great that you choose some of these people because not all of them have a huge following. You could walk up to the first 1,000 wrestling fans and they wouldn't know, Elvira.
Right.
998 of 1,000 would say, who's that? So you're obviously not doing this to get rich. So I think it's great that you're an artist at heart and you're doing projects you believe in.
Well, there's certain books that you jump on and you want to do because and you know that they're going to do well. I knew Chris Candido's would do well coming out of the gate, and I knew Tracy's would, and they both did. And Victoria's has certainly taken off as well. There's a lot of people who've gotten to know her the last couple of years as she's reemerged in the wrestling business. But Black Panther Jim Mitchell and Elvira Snodgrass go back to my first book. My first book was called Bluegrass Brawlers: The Story of Professional Wrestling in Louisville. And I was reading about both of those, and they stuck out to me as I was reading about, the Allen Athletic Club of the 1940s, and these names kept popping up. And, Jim Mitchell caught my eye, being an African-American, being from Louisville. And I was fortunate enough to be able to track down a guy who had a lot of his possessions from after he had passed away. Actually, I had quite a few things on display last time you guys were I was with you guys. That stuff's now over at a museum in Louisville. Hopefully, it's going to be putting that stuff on display here in the next year. And Elvira was one. There was, in particular, I remember a day that Jim Cornette came down to the public library with me in Louisville, and the name Cousin Elvira just started making him laugh. And but she's one that really kind of caught my eye and my interest. And of course, there was the legend and the story about her with the car accident that ended her career, where according to family lore, she actually cut her arm off to get out of the car because her arm had been pinned between the car door and the ground.
Oh, I've done that a couple of times.
Yes. You know, there's some, you know, the newspaper records don't necessarily bear that out. That could be just be family lore. It could be kind of a mix. But the amazing story I came across actually at the 11th hour with her. And this is thanks in part to Chris Bergstrom of the Fabulous Ladies of Wrestling, I think that's what it's called, Facebook page. Before she was Elvira Snodgrass, it's known that she was Edna Yoder. But she also had a couple other names, including Betty Nichols. And as Betty Nichols in late 1938, she was the last lady to pin Mildred Burke and take Mildred Burke's title off of her. And she was the women's champion for about 3 weeks. She dropped it back to Mildred 3 weeks later. But he came across a photo of her in the Columbus newspapers, and we kept cross-referencing and looking at this and that and running it by different guys. And then I found some photos in the Courier Journal. And during that span, when she had defeated Mildred Burke, and sure enough, that's Elvira Snodgrass in those photos. So again, like you said, Evan, it's not a story a lot of people know, but it's an amazing story. It's somebody that I wanted to write about. I was passionate about. There's a couple of those like that. I'd love to do Marge Bennett. She was a circus performer before she became a wrestler. Also, died tragically young in a car accident in '57. Wee Willie Davis is another guy who fascinates me. I mean, this is a guy who is a wrestler and an actor and an inventor. Famously, he was on a game show and won quite a bit of money.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Why don't you do one book with all of these guys?
I thought about it.
Like obscure wrestlers with amazing stories. That might be more marketable than the individual titles.
It could be, and that's something where I could loop in, like a guy like Stu Gibson, who's from my hometown of New Albany, Indiana. And 2 years ago, I had the pleasure of getting him inducted to the New Albany High School Hall of Fame, and with his sister. It's just another, again, a name people don't know, but just some. If you guys will indulge me, I'll tell you a good Stu Gibson story. This guy, he was the hometown hero from New Albany High School. He went off and served his country in World War II. Crossed the river, went to the University of Louisville, became a football hero. Led the team in scoring in his final season playing football. He got into the pro wrestling game and kind of did the Kurt Angle thing, where he became the arrogant heel. I'm your local hero. You should all bow to me and everything like that. Became one of the top most hated heels in Louisville after Bill Longson kind of took him under his wing. And ultimately, he moved on to San Antonio and kind of settled down there and worked there for a couple years and then retired from the business. But great story I got about Stu, and I got this from a couple different people who were there and who remember the story. One night there's a building in Jeffersonville, Indiana, which is right next door to New Albany, and New Albany and Jeffersonville high schools have had a rivalry going back 100 years. They hate each other's guts, but they were working a building in Jeffersonville that had a little marquee out front. It kind of jutted out a little angle, and Stu had parked his car, a brand new convertible Studebaker, right next to that canopy. And there were a couple of Jeff High School students who were at the show that night, and they hated Stu anyway because number one, he had been a New Albany Bulldog years before, and number two, he was the bad guy. So a couple of the senior guys, they dared this little freshman guy, and I got to interview him. Billy Parker, I believe was his name. They lifted Billy up onto this little canopy in front of the building. He jumped down onto Stu's car and smashed in, the convertible top of this car. They go, they run, they hide. They're watching from behind a car. They're giggling about all this. Stu comes out. He pops the thing back in. He drives his car off. All right. 30 years later, Billy Parker's at lunch with one of his coworkers, and he's telling him this funny story from when he was in high school. Has no idea the gentleman sitting across from him happens to be Stu Gibson's brother-in-law. So Stu's brother-in-law goes and he calls Stu and he says, "Hey, do you remember an incident years ago?" And Stu goes, "Yeah, I sure do." He says, "Well, I know the guy who's responsible for it." Good. So the next time Stu's up from San Antonio, Stu's brother-in-law arranges lunch with his friend Billy. Stu's there in the place, and his brother-in-law's sitting at the table. Billy walks in, his brother-in-law gives him the signal. Stu puts the guy in a headlock and whispers in his ear, "I've been waiting 30 years to get my hands on you." Yeah. So, of course, I sat down and had a nice lunch and everything like that. What's really, really funny, the kind of the cherry on top of all this, is I told the story at New Albany High School when we were putting him into the Hall of Fame. It's like a year and a half ago. The next guy up to be inducted is a former basketball coach and athletic director at New Albany High School who had previously graduated from Jeffersonville High School in the mid-1950s, and commented, "I'm not going to say who was involved or whatever, or anything like that, but I remember the night Stu Gibson's car got attacked."
Yeah.
John, I wanted to apologize because I had screwed up. I booked you in last month, April originally, and then just spazzed when I was having work done on my knee. So I really wanted to apologize. A couple of quick things. If you please hit me up for Wahoo McDaniel photos and also some ribs and stories, him pulling stuff on Dory Jr., on Johnny Valentine in Houston.
Oh, sorry.
I've got a lot of lots of Wahoo AWA stories. And if please consider, I know he's a little bit more well-known, but still not so well-known by today's wrestling fans, Wild Red Barry. That would be cool.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Wild Red, he made a big impression in Louisville one night. He did the which year was it? They used to do a big policeman's benefit show in the 1950s over in Louisville, what's now the Louisville Gardens. It was the Armory at the time, and I believe it was the year they had Luthez. I want to say it was Luthez versus Baron Leone, and it was after they had the big gate where they broke the 100,000 mark and everything. But Wild Red Barry stole the show, and that's in the newspapers the day after. That's all the Courier Journal wanted to talk about was him running his big mouth. But that's certainly a wild character that would be fun to do more on.
Oh, he did movies, etc. Of course, we're talking to John Cosper, the author of the Chris Candido book, No Gimmicks Needed. And when you were mentioning, obviously we're indebted to you for helping out Tracy Smothers, and then he hooked you up on or suggested strongly you do the book. So that's why I'm glad I was able to find my Smoky Mountain shots of Tracy against Chris. I've got other shots in the book too, but just a lot of stuff. I think I told you when we were talking about your book how devoted Chris was to Tammy, and I hope it was reciprocal on her end, because besides, like at the Gordon Scazzari thing, I think it was winter of '91, where basically our booker Eddie Gilbert didn't show. He was married for about 6 weeks to Medusa. He got paid in advance, sadly, to book, didn't show, just faxed in the booking sheet, which was unusable. So a number of us had to band together with Dutch Mantel, Sheik, and Pez Watley to book this thing. And I ended up, I don't want to take credit, but booked supposedly what was the first Candido-Sabu match. And then they had matches everywhere besides ECW. But when Chris was brought out by Ron Head for like an ICW show in Northern California a number of years later, and they had a terrific ladder match. The very first thing Chris did when he got off the plane was call Tammy. The very first thing he did at the arena, and he had one of the earliest cell phones that I can recall then or seeing, was call Tammy. And every time, wherever I was with him, whether it was Florida stuff with Cora Luzo and then some of those characters, Howard Brody for the renewed NWA, with Steve Ricard from Asia or anywhere, and that was who he was. All those cards with Coraluzzo, and Popeye sometimes coming down to the ring with him. Those 12-hour Coraluzzo cards prior to even the Todd starting Eastern Championship. It was, just a ton of great Chris stories, and you've captured the book. I mean, everybody should be talking about this book, and let's actually hear where people can order it, because people can, I'm sure, PayPal order it from foreign countries like Japan. A lot of interest has got to be there, or Europe.
I'll say it's in Amazon. It's available on Amazon in Europe. It's available on Amazon Japan and Australia. If folks do want to contact me for signed copies, I've got copies that have mine and Johnny's signatures and everything. You can order domestically at eatsleepwrestle.com. You can find most of my books there and everything. I don't have international shipping available through my website, but if folks want to reach out to me, I'll certainly work that out with them. I've done that with a few people already. But eatsleepwrestle.com is my website, and you can also find the book on Amazon. It's done extremely well on Amazon this year. So
John, can you tell me something about Chris Candido that you found out while researching the book that you had no idea about Chris before you started researching him?
I mean, gosh, there's a lot of things. And just the love for life the guy had, the tremendous sense of humor, and his desire to do anything to be on a card. Ian Rotten was talking to me about, you talk about Corluzzo running long shows. Ian Rotten runs shows still that can run 6, 7, 8 hours, and he was working on one of those shows, when he was kind of making his comeback, and he'd worked early in the evening. And you had to stay till the end of the night, whether it was 2 a.m., 3 a.m., in order to get your pay from Ian. And Chris is sitting around restless in the back, and he goes over to Ian. He's like, "Can I go back out and wrestle again?" And he's like, "You've already wrestled, and we got an angle, you're running, everything. I can't send you back out. Well, put me under a hood." It's like, Chris, they're going to see your tattoo. They know who you are. They know your body. They're going to know you as soon as you go out there. He's wanted to go back out there so bad. He actually directed me to a match, and this is one that the purists may or may not enjoy, but it's something you have to see. It was at a heavy hitters tournament that IWA Mid-South ran. And this was back when IWA Mid-South's roster had, at any good night, you could have AJ Styles, Daniel Bryan, Seth Rollins, Cesaro, Nigel McGuinness, just incredible stacked amount of talent back then. CM Punk, Chris Hero, Colt Cabana, guys like that. But he's running this heavy hitters tournament. This is a more serious type thing. I believe he had Samoa Joe on the show and some other guys. And they were doing more of the Japanese strong style. And Candido went to Ian. He said, "I know you got all this stuff going on, everything like that, but can I put something together to kind of show, you got the sports side of wrestling tonight, but let me show the entertainment side of wrestling." And he said, "That's not what we're doing tonight, Chris." I said, "Well, just let me put something together." So it's a 4-on-4 match. Candido's involved, CM Punk, Nigel McGuinness, Cesaro. There's a couple other guys. I don't remember the names right off the top of my head. It is a masterpiece of wrestling comedy. The first couple of minutes is the ref. Of course, he pats everybody down and everything. He gets over to the bad guys. Everybody's got something. Somebody's got brass knuckles in their trunks. Somebody's got something else in their trunks. There's like a 2-pound dumbbell that comes out of somebody's trunks, and Chris does the bit where he grabs hold of it and it pulls him straight to the ground as if he can't even lift it up. And they get into the match. Chris is the first guy working, and one of the things he was doing at that time that drove Ian nuts was he would make sure that his pants got pulled down to the back, so his butt's hanging out. So he does a flip off the thing, and his butt's hanging out. Guy body slams him, tags the next guy in. He body slams him, tags CM Punk in. Punk body slams him. He's wiping his hands off going back. Tags the next guy. He body slams him. Chris staggers back up, and the ref body slams him. The crowd just goes nuts. And that's literally, we're 2 minutes into the match at this point. There's another 10 minutes of it. It's just Chris having fun and putting guys over and having a ball. Another of my favorite stories actually came from Tommy Dreamer. He was telling me about, of course, he's married to Beulah. And Beulah was talking about, because he said, Beulah and I were talking a couple nights before, because she knows going to be talking to you about the book. She's like, "You remember that one night that Chris had that thing in his trunks and the ref couldn't find it?" And Tommy's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, what did he have?" Tommy's like, "Are you kidding me? You don't know what he had." No, he didn't have anything. Chris didn't have anything, She's like, I swear, he put it in his trunks, he pit it in his knee pad, yeah, he didn't have anything. It was totally played. It was a total rib. He had nothing in his hands, and just, again, just another great comedy bit. And the fact that all these years later, Tommy's like, "I cannot believe you're Mark." Told his own wife she was a Mark. But certainly the sense of humor was a lot of fun. Anytime somebody had a funny Candido story, and I mean, Johnny and I probably could have filled another book with just the stories of him and his brother just goofing off and having a great time.
That's what I'm going to say. Next time we have you on, I want you to talk about what a great impressionist he was, like the Pritchard brothers doing Piper, etc. He could do many, and also maybe about his markdom with Terry Funk, Terry giving him.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Before he got to WCW, but Chris did the best Terry Funk, and everybody can do Terry Funk, but he did one of the best. So Russ had a good point.
So Ian had a good Terry. He was one of his last matches before he went to TNA with IWA Mid-South was against Terry Funk, and Ian was telling him, "Yeah, last month Dusty was here and everything. They got juice and this and that and all that." And Terry's response was, "I know now what I must do." And he was, I don't know what's going to happen, but he hit him with a trash bag, and God knows what was in that trash bag, but he busted Chris open with it.
Well, John, please plug your website and let people know how they can reach and check out all your projects.
Certainly. If you're looking for my wrestling books, it's at eatsleepwrestle.com. Right now, let me look on the shelf here. I got Tracy Smothers' book in stock. I still have some signed copies of his. He signed a lot of signature pads and everything for me. Early last year when the book came out, I've still got a few available. So unfortunately, he passed in October. I've got Chris's book, Candido, signed by myself and Johnny Candido. Princess Victoria's book, Madman Pondo. I have a couple of Dr. D. David Schultz on the shelf. Both my Louisville books, Grappling by Gaslight, which is a short story book based on the wrestling stories of the 1880s. Elvira Snodgrass, Black Panther, Jim Mitchell, all those are in stock at eatsleepwrestle.com. If you're a fiction reader, go check out my fiction site, johncosper.com. I've got a couple of sci-fi novels. I've got a collection of film noir styles fairy tales. I've got a kid's book up there and some other stuff. So go check that stuff out as well.
The prolific John Cosper. Prolific.
Well, did you write more in this year of COVID? Did you find that being kind of isolated at home made you write more, or decide to do more writing or do more research?
I think on balance I probably did. I did slow down a little bit after I got Tracy's book done. Scott Romer and I put his book together. It was kind of a crash. Literally, we put his book together in 2 months because when you're working with Scott, he goes full tilt. So it was kind of a crash.
Scott's on here next week. He's on this show next week.
He was, I was worn out after Scott's and kind of, I did Elvira's after that one, and then really took my time with Candido's. So, but I did a lot of fiction writing on the side and everything. I've got a couple of more fiction projects that'll be coming out. If not late this year, then next year. But I kind of take projects one at a time, though, as far as the wrestling and just kind of get a feel for them. Victoria's came pretty quickly because she'd already done a lot of advanced work. Wahoo, I want to take my time with and make sure I do it right. And I got another one with Madman Pondo coming up after that, and a few other projects down the road. But right now, it's 100% focused on Wahoo, and every night I'm getting to hear some great Wahoo stories. So,
I used to see Wahoo every month in Philly for the NWA. He was amazing performer. Yeah.
I'll have to get with you. Anybody's got some Wahoo stories, feel free to reach out to me. And again, this is going to be like an oral history. It's going to be everybody else telling Wahoo's story versus just me sitting here telling you, he was born in such and such and whatever, and this is what he did. So
the story was he bled every match.
Uh-huh.
Pretty much.
That's been like the worst forehead I ever saw was El Signo's, way worse than Abbey or the guys like that. But Wahoo was kind of up there. Some of the wounds when you look, inches away at them.
Yeah, some guys Bruiser Brody photos are hard to look at. Abdullah photos are hard to look at. Just like, oh my gosh.
Valiance.
Yeah.
So, John, is there, like, say, a book that you would really like to write? Let's say, even if the person's no longer around, if you could have a chance to write a book about anyone, who would you want to write a book about?
Anybody from the Von Erich family. Kevin Von Erich was my favorite, and I know he's told his story a lot and everything, and I've heard folks say that he's kind of tired of having to tell the Von Erich family story, but. I got to get into wrestling during the WWF Superstar days and the Rock and Wrestling era, but it was as a middle schooler every day after school on ESPN watching WCCW. Kevin Von Erich was my favorite. The Dingo Warrior, Percival Pringle III, Brian Adias, the Freebirds. That was really kind of the promotion and everything that really hooked me in. Anything Von Erich, I would certainly be on board with.
John, we tracked down, and he's living right near me now, Al Madrill, who wanted nothing to do with the business for years when he left Portland. He spent a lot of time, 2 years, feuding with Leroy Brown in Los Angeles, my home base territory. But he's got a car repair mechanic place.
Yeah. And, actually, another the Simpson brothers from WCCW. Those were two other guys that I really enjoy, and I found out I guess they're still in the Houston area. They've got a furniture store or something like that. So, but these guys are still around, and they've got stories worth telling. So,
it's no gimmicks needed. Chris Candido, the author, the prolific multimedia talent of John Cosper, Cosper. Go out and get it. I know everybody's going to love it. 5 stars. Joe Bob Briggs says 5-star book. Yes. Just like the rest of John's.
Thank you so much for being on our show this week, and we'll definitely have you again as a return interview when you have your Wahoo McDaniel book ready to go.
Thank you, guys. Happy to come back and talk wrestling anytime.
King of wrestling, because of so many books. That's what we need to call you. That's your new tagline, at least for me.
I'm here to serve the wrestlers and tell their stories. That's my goal and my purpose. And every day I'm kind of like, I wake up and I got messages from this person or that. I'm like, I can't believe what I do. So it's a real pleasure.
Very inspiring. Thank you so much for being on this week.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, John.
All right. So now we are going to add our second guest. This is I don't usually add folks during the call, but let's see.
Let's pay tribute to Olympia Dukakis, passed away, and actually that was one of Tammy Sitch's favorite movies, Moonstruck. But Olympia Dukakis.
I loved her in Tales of the City.
Yeah. God, it was stage, Broadway, off-Broadway, TV.
And her matches with Moolah were great. Yes.
Elvira Snodgrass too.
That's right. She was a great actress. Olympia Dukakis. R.I.P.
So right now I'm trying to. Oh, here we are with a man that I will have the pride of introducing, and that is Wayne Mattei from one of our longest distance. When we say wrestling and everything coast to coast, we're going to the most extreme coast that you can go to, and that is Australia, down under. Wow. And Wayne is better known to a lot of folks as being Sergeant Slaughter on the new Young Rock series, which I'm a huge fan of, and Evan is as well. So welcome, Wayne, and thank you so much for joining our podcast this week.
No, welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. First of all, you are fantastic on the show, and I had absolutely no idea you were Australian. So please tell us about how you got that role on the Young Rock.
Wow. Well, that's great. Thank you to start with. Look, I tried very hard on my American accent, so it was a test, but obviously we got through it, which was great.
So how did you hear about the role, and how did you get the role as Sergeant Slaughter?
Yeah, look, I'd just previously done a film with James Cromwell, and in that movie I played a really big, mean male nurse in a nursing home. And it was just ironic that the casting agent that did that movie was casting for Young Rock as well. And she was aware that I was a professional wrestler already, so she figured it was just a perfect fit to try to audition me and see how I'd go for any roles in the TV series.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. And had you ever done a TV show before?
I've been acting for about 10 years, so I've done a few movies, a few TV ads and bits and pieces like that, as well as wrestling for over 15 years. So I mean, that's a good lot of acting in itself.
Yes, you'd written a quick little story online about how you had to shave your beard for the role. What was that all about?
Yeah, look, during the audition process, I actually had quite an extensively large black beard. And obviously wrestling for so long as well, I'd maintained my goatee, two-tone goatee, very similar to what I have now. So, it was 15 plus years that I'd never seen my chin. So it was quite scary to be told that I had to shave my entire beard off, maintain just a small moustache. And this was only just to find out if they were going to cast me. They hadn't cast me yet at all. So it was a big gamble, but I'm glad that I did it.
Wow. So tell me what working on the set of the Young Rock was like for you, and did you get to meet the Rock himself?
Look, working on the set was amazing. It felt like stepping back into the 80s when you're walking to your trailer and you pass Macho Man, or you pass the Iron Sheik, or Matt Willie as Andre the Giant. It was quite surreal to have those people around. We didn't actually get to see Rock. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to travel to Australia. His family and himself have only just recovered from COVID at that time, and obviously the travel wasn't an option to be able to get him down to us.
Was the Young Rock filmed in Australia? I didn't even know that.
Yes, it was. It was filmed in Brisbane, Australia. So we depicted Hawaii as the Gold Coast in Queensland, and then we did a lot of the other shooting in the studios there in Brisbane.
All right, I won't hog the interview completely. You gentlemen have something to ask our guests.
In here because he probably doesn't know. I've been shooting wrestling since 1966, primarily for the magazines and writing. So I only had one Australia tour, Jim Barnett 72, when it was basically, at least wrestler-wise, booked by Mark Lewin and Spiros Arion. So I don't know if you know how huge it was. Abby, King Curtis, Ray Stevens, and Pepper Gomez recreating their San Francisco Roy Shire angle. Mario Milano, Tony Parisi, a.k.a. Pugliese. Just so much talent. Killer Carl Cox, who then turned face. I think Australia was the only place, to my knowledge, he turned face. That was an amazing, insane, violent, fantastic territory for that couple of years, although it was, hugely hot. But I've been watching how, obviously, because I've had to report on each episode of Young Rock and had no clue it was done there. But I was able actually to shoot when she'd come out to San Jose, and I had shot in Honolulu. Leah Maivia brought Polynesian Pro Wrestling, so we got to see a lot of that stuff. So I kind of been hitting my WWE pals in the office in Stamford, Connecticut with some of these things didn't really quite happen. They're taking some liberties with stuff. But it's an excellent show. It's really fun. It just got re-upped. It actually set a record for NBC streaming, so it got re-upped for its whole second season. And the final episode, I don't think, doesn't debut in the U.S. till either this Tuesday or a week from Tuesday. So it's amazing. So you have those guys in it all depicted. The Offensica guys are dead on, and you were great. Andre is very good. A lot of poignant, things like when he's sitting on that park bench with Young Rock, Dwayne, or Dewey as a child, with the birds and stuff, feeding the birds. Really cool stuff. So I'm sad that Northern California, where he was born and spent a lot of years, isn't quite mentioned there because Otta and Rocky lived there, but maybe they'll touch on that in season 2 and stuff. So you've done an excellent job. But actually, I'm going on here. Tell us about your own wrestling career, because you're quite a bit younger. You almost look like a mix of Ivan Koloff, Mad Dog Vachon, and Ev. Who else does he remind you of? Maybe a little Alexis
Siegfried Stanky.
Siegfried, a little bit of the Warlord.
Yes.
He was big for Leroy McGurk. Yeah. But tell us about your own wrestling career and then how you got into acting in the first place, and then I'll shut up.
Yeah. No, great. Thank you. Look, it's ironic, my wrestling, all the old school wrestlers that you were mentioning in Australia, my dad actually took me to watch them when I was a lot younger. I'm 47, so I was around when they were still around a bit. So I got to see some of them, and that really resonated with me to start with. These big guys were beating the hell out of each other, and, they weren't getting in trouble either. So that was great. So I kind of enjoyed that. And then we had a tour from the WWF come to Australia, and they brought the likes of Corporal Kirshner, Nikolai Volkov, George the Animal Steel. And a long story short, at the show, George went ballistic and started throwing all the front row seats into the ring and the barricades, and we were sitting in the front row. And I'm standing there, and one of the WWF officials has looked at George, and George has pointed straight down at me, and he's just in his big, deep voice, he's going, "You!" And I've panicked. I've just stood there like a deer in the headlights, and the WWF officials come up and grabbed me and he's picked me up and put me in the ring. So George then went in turn and went and made me tear up the turnbuckle like he used to do.
Wow.
So this was at age maybe 9 or 10. This is the first time I've ever been in a WWF ring. Needless to say, the following day at high school, I was the king of the school because I was in the ring with George the Animal Steel, which was great. Considering I was a bully that used to get beat up, but then all of a sudden I'm the king of the school. So that was great. But what had happened was I'd always loved wrestling as a kid, but I knew that I couldn't find too many places in Australia where I could be trained to become one. I thought it was going to be impossible to do. So instead I transferred over and I did bodybuilding. If I couldn't wrestle, I wanted to look like one. So I trained myself up, and I actually won Junior Mr. South Australia at I think about 21 years of age, at 115 kilos on stage, which is quite big. That's like 200 and something pounds, I think. Then I ended up working in security because I was a big guy and so on. And I had a security company at the time, and a local wrestling company came to us and said, "Would you guys be able to supply security to a wrestling show?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." I said, "Yeah, that would be great." So we did the security of the show. I stood next to the runway, and when the doors opened, there I am standing there. But all these kids just rushed at me, and they're all standing there, and they're all taking pictures of me and all this. And I'm going, "What are you doing? Go take your seat." And they're like, "No, you're one of the wrestlers. Can we have a photo with you and all this?" And I'm like, "I'm not a wrestler. I'm here doing security. I'm not part of the show." So this show went on. It finished. The promoter come back to me, and I shook his hand and said, "I hope you're happy with everything." And he goes, "Yeah, it was all good except for one thing." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "No one looked at the ring all night. They were looking at you." So, sorry, I don't know what I did, but yeah, he said, "Look, it's an easy fix." He said, "If you like, we can train you up and we'll put you in the ring." And I said, "Are you serious?" And he said, "Yeah, we've got a training school and everything." So I went and trained. I did my time, and then the way they brought me into the wrestling was they put me again on the runway doing security. And what had happened this night, they had a TV announcer from one of the local TV stations who was the news reporter. He's in the ring and he's interviewing the heels and so on like that. And all of a sudden, of course, the heels turn around and put a beat down on the news reporter. And he's quite popular, so the crowd was going nuts. And next minute, they're sort of still looking at me. So I've done the old Hulk Hogan with my security shirt and just going rah, like this, tore my shirt off, ran into the ring and just cleaned house and saved the reporter. So that's how they brought me in. And it was funny that the way I did that was like a maniac, and that's where my name come from, because I went running to the ring like a maniac.
And now that you're on a hit show seen by millions of people, what do you hope for in the future? Do you tell your agent, "Get me a romantic lead, get me a comedy," or do you want to do action movies like Vin Diesel? Where do you see yourself now?
Yeah, look, I'm open to all of the above. We've got shortly starting to be cast as one of the new Mad Max films, Furiosa. So I would love to be a part of that. I'm open to comedy, action. My wife thinks I'm pretty funny, so she reckons I should do comedy, but we'll see how that goes. I don't mind. I'll do anything, but the acting bug is more so in the forefront of my mind now than before, because I had a lot of other things going on. And plus, I'm getting to the age of 47, so if I'm going to do it, I have to do it now.
There you go.
Absolutely. Tell me how you got ready for the Sergeant Slaughter character, and how. I mean, again, I had no idea you were Australian. You've got the voice down perfect, and it doesn't exactly match your voice in real person. So how did you get the Sergeant Slaughter voice, which is very unique, down?
Yeah, look, that was ironic. I mean, it was at first they actually made me audition for Brutus Beefcake, and I thought, well, maybe body-wise I could be like Beefcake. I am extremely heavily tattooed, so I figured Beefcake used to wear the long jacket with the tassels and that. They might be able to get away with covering that up. So I submitted an audition for Beefcake. It was very short. It was like one line. It wasn't too long at all, and it was a very small role, but I didn't hear anything back from that. And I kept pushing my agent because I really wanted to be a part of the show. And I said, "Give me another one. Give me another one. What else do we have?" Then they come back with the audition piece for King Kong Bundy. And I'm like, I hope they have a fat suit because I'm nowhere near the right size. So again, I did the audition for that one. Again, that was very small. It was just a one-liner. And then still didn't hear anything. And then all of a sudden they came back to me and they said, "Right, do you know Sergeant Slaughter?" And I said, "Do I know Sergeant Slaughter? Of course I do." And they said, "Right, we want you to audition for him." So I was really excited about this one. So what I actually went to do, I went to an army disposal store and I bought a camouflage jacket, bought the camouflage hat, I got the aviator sunglasses, I even got the whistle on a lanyard. I did the whole 9 yards. I got everything I could think of. And then they gave me the script and it had a bit of dialogue, which I was really happy about, but they said, then we want you to ad lib at the end if you can and do something a little funny. So in the show, as you've seen, I say that I've made notes for Macho Man, and I turn around the notepad and I have a picture of some eagles and the American flags and all this sort of stuff, and then the slight little bit up the top that says Macho Man Elbow. In the audition, I've actually grabbed like a notebook like this, let's say, and I've held it up and I've gone, "Yeah, don't worry, I've been taking notes for him. And by the way, see, here's the Macho Man. Oh, yeah!" Then I threw the pad down like that.
Wow, that's a great impression too.
And that's where it went from that to then having the option of, we need to see what your jawline looks like. We need you to shave your beard off.
Wow, that's really incredible.
Who are some of the actors that have influenced you?
I'm a big 80s action fan, and part of my role in security for many years is I've been a bodyguard to a lot of A-list celebrities. I've protected John Travolta, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Steven Seagal, David Beckham. I actually work for WWE and protect all of the superstars when they come to Australia and also in Asia around Singapore, Philippines, and Malaysia. So, you know, the likes of Arnold, Stallone, Dolph Lundgren, anyone that you would put in the Expendables would turn around, and I could turn around and say, yeah, look, I love them. They're great.
I could see you. I could see you in the Expendables. You'd be
you were the Expendables.
Please, I'd be more than to.
Yeah, it looks a little like Boss Rutan, a little bit. MMA superstar, who also knows.
You were the Expendables expendable. They would put you on the front line to save themselves from any kind of hassle.
Well, see, this look that I have at the moment is a bit full on. It's a very black beard. It's pointy. I've got the white. I'm shooting a few scenes in a jail tomorrow, so I have to be this big, nasty, evil-looking inmate. And then on the weekend, we're actually filming a horror film where I get to play like a Mad Max character that's riding on the outside of a hot rod kind of a thing. So I'm probably a little bit more emphasized than I normally would look at the moment.
Has anyone recognized you in Australia as Sergeant Slaughter yet, or say you're the guy that was Sergeant Slaughter on the Young Rock?
Yeah, look, again, in the security company that we have, sometimes I do have to go out and work on the door of a nightclub in town, and it's quite funny. I get so much attention. I wear a body camera as well while I work for my safety, and it's ironic. At the moment, I have a 7-minute package from all clips from my body camera where people have either said, you know, you're the guy from the Young Rock, you're Sergeant Slaughter. But more ironically, what I get more than anything else is everyone will come up to me and they'll go, do you know you look like Dave Bautista?
Yeah.
Oh, that might be a future role for you. You got the tattoos for it.
Yeah, I'm covered. I've been told that I do look like him quite a bit and could almost be his body double when he does Guardians of the Galaxy and so on. So.
Oh yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, well, that would be a big. If you want acting in a big role, there's one for you that will maybe keep you from having to do any bodyguarding jobs for a little bit. They could cast you in something like that. Can you tell me a little bit also about your wrestling career in Australia and maybe some of the bigger names that you fought or some of the best matches that you've been able to fight in Australia?
Yeah, look, wrestling for 15 years. I've wrestled all over Australia, anywhere and everywhere that you could think of. I was booked. I was, for a while, in the middle part of my career, I was pretty hot. Everyone wanted me on their show. You know, my character and my image was great for a poster. It would sell tickets to get butts in seats. Because I'm about 6'3", but when my wrestling boots are on, I'm about 6'6". I'm 300 pounds. I'm covered in tattoos. I wear white contacts when I come out. I'm, you know, the living action figure that walks out because, as you can imagine, a lot of the Australian guys that do it, to their credit, they can do the flips, the jumps, they can do the internationals and everything, but they're an average look at Joe. They don't have the character side of things. So that was what was in my favour. So wrestling all over Australia had been great. My favourites, but they'd always put me in a steel cage. They always loved putting me in a steel cage. And I mean, for me, that was great. You're limited on what you can do in the cage, but I always used to love using the cage. I'd pick people up and throw them in it and everything. But then to climb out over the top to see somebody my size going all the 15 feet up in the air and then climbing out was always a big thing for the crowd, so they used to love it. My best match, and funny enough, it was the match that I retired on in 2017, was against Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner.
Wow.
Mm. Wow. So I figured he couldn't get any better than that. I might as well retire on top with him. So
he probably should have considered the same thing when he came back to the United States. It wasn't such a great return, so maybe he should have made his last match with you.
You know what? He was really gracious. He was really nice. He was nice with me. I think because I was older in age. Funny enough, I was bigger than him as well. And he did say to me at one point, he goes, look, I want to go out there, but I don't want to get hurt. And I said, neither do I, mate. It's okay. I said, I'm sure we'll look after each other. So it was a basic start in the ring. We sprawled out to the outside. He's busted open the guardrail. We've brawled through the arena. We've gone up through the bar. We've smashed everything up we could up there. Then we've come back down. Then we've gone into the ring, did a few bits and pieces, and then we went home. The crowd loved it. So it was nice and easy.
Was this is after his heart attack? Because I think the heart attack scare was like 3 years ago. I don't know if you were aware of that, but maybe that months later. I was just going to ask because guys like the original Sheik, Fireball Throne Sheik, Eddie Farhat, King Curtis, Arion before we lost him, Carl Cox, and other guys said the Australian territory was really super tough, tougher than like even hitting all the major cities in Canada because it was like brutal trying to drive. I don't know if you've heard this too, and that's kind of one of the reasons it failed, other than like there was just too much blood and stuff like some U.S. territories. But the guy said that driving to the major big cities in Australia was just killer, and then having to fly to parts of New Zealand afterwards. Is that your experience? Is it a tough drive? Because the weather's super hot there, depending on the time of year.
Yeah, well, I live in South Australia, which, if you can imagine, is right down the bottom of Australia. Then I used to fly once a month over to Western Australia, which would be like from one side of the country to the other. Luckily, the promoters would always pay and fly me there, so I wouldn't have to drive or travel. Most of the time, whenever I wrestled anywhere, the promoters would pay to fly me, which was great because even Adelaide to Sydney is about, is Adelaide to Melbourne or Adelaide to Sydney is about 14 hours in itself, and that's a straight drive just to get there. Wow. So quite a distance, and I mean, it's easy to fly. You'd fly from Adelaide down the bottom up to Queensland. That would be 2.5 hour flight. Adelaide to Perth, which is the furthest one, is about 6 hours flight. And then Adelaide to Melbourne is about a half hour and so on. So one side is a lot more achievable than the other, but flying is 100% better than driving. So, but back in the day, I'm assuming they would drive more so. But
Jim Barnett was too cheap to fly there. And I'll shut up. I just wanted to ask, now that we know where you live there, have you been able to make the trek to Antarctica to see emperor penguins or any of the cool stuff? Australia has the most amazing animal life on the planet.
Absolutely, yeah. I haven't made the trek down there to see them, but we have gone to SeaWorld in Queensland where they have the emperor penguins, and my wife and my son actually had the privilege to go inside of where they were housed in like the big freezer, and they were able to hand feed them and be in there. They had I think it was an Antarctic experience or something. It was cool, but we got some great photos of them doing it. It's great.
Now, I'm a real life attorney, and in my early days of practicing, I did have clients that were in Queensland, and they gently told me that in Queensland, Mad Max was filmed there not because it's a science fiction movie in Queensland, but Mad Max is more like a documentary about like what goes on in Queensland. It's crazy enough over there that they didn't have to do much in the way of special effects. They just started the camera rolling, and whatever showed up there. And
yeah,
so it's a little wild down there in Queensland.
It's not too bad. I mean, look, a lot of the filming they have done also too is in a place called Broken Hill. Now that is 6 hours out of Adelaide. That's in the middle of the outback, in the middle of nowhere. There's a town out there called Silverton, and that's where majority of the original Mad Max was filmed. There's actually a Mad Max museum in Silverton where they have all the vehicles, the costumes. They've actually got a nice big picture of me in there as well because I filmed a music video clip that was Mad Max orientated. So I was one of the Mad Max characters with a big chain covered in all black stuff. And if you remember with the original Mad Max, the only food that was left on the planet because the apocalypse had happened was dog food. So they had this stuff called dinky dye dog food. So they put me inside of a cage, again, a cage, and I'm standing there in the corner eating this can of dinky dye dog food before I see these two guys in the cage, and then I just drop it and just go berserk and get them. So,
now, what advice would you give a young wrestler or a young actor? Because you've had a long road, and now you're on a hit show. What would you say to somebody? Let's say your nephew or niece or somebody came to you for advice.
Look, I'd say stick to it as much as you can. It's a hard road, you know. There's so many no's before you get a yes, but the yes will always come around that corner. So you have to keep going to get to that yes. It took me a long time to get cast in anything. I think the first movie I got cast in was called Broken Hill, the movie where I played a prisoner inmate. So it was a very generic role, just sitting in a room where we were discussing stuff and so on. And I think I was on camera for maybe about 5 seconds or something, but that was the start of it. And then once you get your face out there and people get to see you and so on, that's when it starts to roll a bit more. And as long as you've got a good agent that can back you and put you forward as well, that always helps. But it's definitely, don't give up. You must stick with this sort of thing. And no matter how much negative comes at you, there's always going to be the positive around the corner. You just have to achieve it and get to it.
There you go.
Have you ever thought about performing in the United States? Have you ever had a chance to perform in the United States?
Yeah, I did. I can't remember what year it was. I did come over and I wrestled for a bit over there. I actually won a world title on the independent circuit in Indianapolis quite a few years ago. It was the undisputed title, so I actually got 2 belts. I used to have them here in my office, but I think we've put them away. I actually had each belt that I made, I had the belt maker remake it so that I could have a belt that I could maintain for myself, keep it home in a box frame, and then I'd pass it on to my 2 boys later on. So I think I've got about 7 titles at the moment. I had won 11, but some of those were double belts that I'd won before. So,
and what do your kids think about your career?
My eldest is 18, just about to turn 18. He's more of a country sort of boy, so the acting and the wrestling for him's like, yeah, it's okay. He normally will tell me off if I put something on Instagram or on Facebook that's about him. He'll tell me off because he goes, Dad, all my friends follow you on Instagram. Can you take that down, please? And I'm like, oh, sorry. Didn't think about that. My 10-year-old, he's just a machine. He just loves beating me up. So I'm thinking he might go the wrestling avenue, I'm hoping. Plus, he's a big ham. He just loves to get in front of the camera as much as he can. So I think we've got a winner with him.
You don't mind if your youngest son gets involved in wrestling? Because some parents, they're like, if you're going to do anything, don't follow in my footsteps. So.
Look, I think he should do whatever makes him happy and he enjoys. If he wants to do that, well, then I'll be behind him 100%, and I'll make sure that I'll be there to make sure everything's done right for him and he's looked after. That's, my focus will be him if he's going to do that. I won't just go ahead and just leave him to his own devices. I'll make sure I take care of him.
Now, if there was an actual Sergeant Slaughter biopic, just about Sergeant Slaughter himself, would you want to have the lead role in that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, I've had quite the interaction with Sarge since the show. We've spoken via email and so on. He's such a great man. He's so lovely. He's so accommodating. He was really, really happy with the way I depicted him in the show. He was really over the moon. He said his wife said that I reminded her of a young Sergeant Slaughter that she met before they were married. One of his lovely daughters has a beautiful 2-year-old little girl that's Sarge's granddaughter. And when the show was aired, his daughter got his granddaughter and popped her in front of the TV and pointed up and said, "Who's that?" And the beautiful little girl's gone, "That's Grandpa."
Wow.
So I can't ask for anything more than that.
I have an amazing 30-second Sergeant Slaughter story. He headlines the Garden against Bruno Sammartino. It's an unbelievable brawl. I walk outside of Madison Square Garden that night. There's a weird vibe in the air. Something's very strange. I walk up to the first guy I see. I said, "What happened?" He said, "John Lennon just got shot." December 8, 1980. True story.
Yeah, and for me, my connection with Australia is that my neighbor up the street here is the nephew of Al Costello with the Kangaroos. And so for a lot of people in the United States, their real exposure to the Australians came from the Kangaroos, the fabulous Kangaroos. So but they're still a very popular team out here, even though it's been many years since they actually wrestled. So when I see the Kangaroos again, I'll definitely think about you. So
awesome, that's great.
And so if there is a second season, you'll be cast as Sergeant Slaughter in the second season. There will be a second season. So you'll be in the Young Rock. We'll see you in the Young Rock in the second season as well, I hope.
Well, fingers crossed. If they deem that the storyline has Sarge in there again, then yeah, definitely I will be in there. I'm hoping that it's going to happen and there's a bit of a reoccurring role with him. I had such a great time on set and the people were great, and just to be able to get out there and play Sarge again, I want to get a bit more. I want to have a singles match in the show if I can, so I can undo the boot and start swinging my boot around at someone in the ring.
That, or if they need Ox Baker, one of these years, you could probably with a little bit of touch up on the beard, I think you'd be a pretty good shoe-in for Ox as well. You have a lot of versatility, so you might get a number of different roles. You know, I'm really glad.
If they pick if they go to the 90s, hopefully there's a bit of Dave Bautista in there. I'm sure I could pull that off as well.
Excellent. You've been a really wonderful guest. Do you mind telling telling our fans how they can get a hold of you if they're interested?
Yeah, absolutely. Look on Facebook. I have a fan page that's called Wayne the Maniac Mattei. On Instagram, my handle is Hell's Vigilante, just one word. So they're probably the best two avenues to find me. My Instagram is more active than my Facebook, as most people are these days. So that's definitely the one to hit me up on for sure.
Great. Well, that's wonderful. You've been a fantastic guest. We would love to have you on, next season, and you can give us some more inside info. Maybe you get a chance to meet The Rock if he's not, now that COVID is hopefully not going to be a big deal for anyone coming up soon. And we really appreciate your contributions to the show this week.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you again all in the
Jeff.
future, and thank you everyone for attending this week. It's a great show, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night, everybody.